Everyone knows that we never went to the moon. Everyone knows that there are more anomalies and problems with the moon's existence than there is the evidence to explain it. There are millions of books, websites, and videos proving it. This is not one of them.
Forward.
This video is about ancient oblivion, about a time as real as the present day, the time of myths and legends, the time before the moon. Now, if you had been told by a random conspiracy theorist or heard on some YouTube video that there was a time here on Earth when forgotten civilizations had never seen the moon that flies across our sky today, you might think it absurd and a waste of time to talk about. But what if I told you that some of the most renowned of the ancient Greeks and Romans, scientists, philosophers, teachers, poets, librarians, politicians, priests, theologians, authors, and psychologists all spoke of a civilization that existed in a time before there was a moon?
Alright everyone, what was Aristotle talking about when he used words like Arcadia and the Pelasgians? Well, I'm going to break these two words down for you real quick. You might notice the word Arcadia. In a lot of movies and books, it's used as a synonym for a place of paradise, like the place that everyone wants to get to, a safe haven. Now, let's break down this word Arcadia. What does it mean? Well, it's basically the word arc, or sometimes people put an H on it to make the word arch, right? What is an arc? An arc is really just simply something that comes down from above, curving downward. Right? Like the McDonald's arches is something that most people are familiar with, but it is an arch. It is something above, and therefore it conveys the meaning of being on top. So, for example, in the Catholic Church, they have archbishops, archangels, etc., and so on and so on. Now, those who are from the arch, or the ark, in your Semitic languages, those who are from is spelled O-N. Those who are from, or the on, those who are from the ark, or the arch, the archon, the archon, the archons, if you want to say it that way. Now, you have ark, then you have aid. Aid just means a result of. So a result of the ark, or an action from the ark, right? A result of the ark. But let's look at the ending of it. This is what's the most interesting to me. The IA, ya, arcade, ya. Why does it always end in IA? You hear so many of our countries around the realm end in the letters IA, and it forces you to pay homage to an ancient immortal, an ancient elven race, an ancient god, however you'd like to call it, named Ya. Also spelled like this. Ya. That's how it was spelled. For example, we've got Mongol Ya, Colombia, Nigeria, Lithuania, and Russia. Alright? Russia, Mongolia, etc., etc., and so on and so on. So, this literally means Yah's place of the arch. The place of the arch where Yah lives or is from. Now, another word for Yah, or EA, is Enki. E-N-K-I. Okay? Enki. Now, if you want to know more about that god Enki and things of that nature, you can watch Enki and the Ten Commandments, another video that I've done. It talks about this particular god, very popular and very famous amongst all the religions of the world. But let's move on. So Arcadia is the place of the arcs where it comes downward, where it curves downward from above, where Yah, or Enki, is from, right? Arcadia. Now, Aristotle also talks about the Pelasgians, right? And I'm going to break the word Pelasgians down. I'm basically going to show you how it is, in my opinion, the word Pleiadian, okay? Now bear with me because we're going to have to learn some simple etymology, which means the study of words or word origins, real fast. Pleiadian, right? You might be familiar with the Pleiades constellation, the 7 sisters in the sky, who also happen to be associated with water, right? Water from above, or rain. Anytime it rained, a lot of times people would attribute that to the Pleiades or the Pleiadian sisters in a particular star system. There's 7 stars all grouped up together. Some people speculate that the word Pleiades derives from the word plane in Greek, which means to sail. There is another connotation with water. Now I'm going to show you how important that water connotation, that water meaning is, especially when it comes back to this particular ancient Elven, or El, or Elohim, whatever you'd like to call it, being, okay? But let's move on. Bear with me, we're going to go step by step. Okay, so here we go. The word Pleiadian actually derives from the word Pelagos. Now, I'm going to focus on 2 parts of this word. This is going to be the first part. P-L-E-I. Pelag. Right? We're going to actually cross out this E right here because there are no actual vowels in the ancient languages. I talk about that in some of my other videos. So, pelagos. And then you have this I right here. Now, let me teach you something about the I real fast. The I has gone through a myriad of evolutionary stages in various languages. But in English, it's the same exact letter as the letter G. The I is the same letter as the letter J. The J is actually the capitalized version of the letter I. There was no letter J until a few hundred years ago. They just capitalized the I by putting a hook on it. So, the I, the G, the J are all the same letter. As a matter of fact, the further back you go, the letter I was pronounced ye or e or yeah. It made a Y sound. So the letter Y, which also has a hook on it, is the same letter. See how it looks like a G, or it could be a J, or it can be an I? These are all the same letters, okay? So this I is also a G. Plag, or plag, or plage. It depends on how you say it through dialect and pronunciation in various cultures, how they change their lettering. I is the same as G, is the same as J, is the same as Y. They're all the same letters pronounced differently, eventually becoming, earning their own symbol in the alphabet. But these are the same words, right? This word plagos means the sea, the ocean, the great body of water, right? So, pleia, or pliage, or pleia, however you want to say it, this also means, by extension, water, right? Or sea, or ocean. A great body of water is the pleia, okay? Now, plag, or pelag, or pelage, however you want to say it, has carried over into some other languages today. I speak French, and I happen to know that the word for the beach in French is plage. Interesting, right? Same exact sound, because it's the same word. It means great body of water. Plage. In Spanish, it's playa. Remember I told you the Y can be a G, can be a J, can be an I, or a Y. Playa, plage, plag, play. They're all the same word. They mean great body of water. Now, or sea. Let's look at the rest of this word. Edian. Pleiadian. Why is it spelled funny like this? Haven't you ever wondered why Pleiades is spelled so funny with these vowels here in the middle? Well, I'm going to break it down. I want you to concentrate on the letter D right here. This letter was a mix-up a while back. In the ancient Semitic languages, when people wrote this letter, right, in earlier languages, if you look over here, I've written the letter D in Hebrew, for example, right? In modern Hebrew, this is the letter D down here. Now, The other letter in the alphabet that looks exactly like it is the letter R. The only difference between the R and the D is this little bit sticks out a tiny bit more right there. That tiny bit means that it's a D. If it comes straight down at a 90-degree angle, it's an R. So what's my point? My point is that not all the ancient people had perfect handwriting. As a matter of fact, they would just scribble things out shorthand, writing very quickly, and scholars of today have to sort of sift through their versions of what the symbols and the letters were. Was it an R or was it a D? This D is actually an R. Okay? So this is Aryan, right? See if I could squeeze it in there. It's an R. Aryan, not Adian, not Pleiadian. It's Pleiades, Aryan. And Aryan, if you've watched my The Secret of the Elves video, I broke down the word Aryan, not something racist or anything that it's become today, unfortunately. The word Aryan basically means those of my immortals, or you could say other words like gods or whatnot, but the immortals were the Aryans. They were a very pale albino-looking race of what I believe to be the elven people, or the ancient gods. The Aryans. So this literally says Aryan, which means immortals from the great sea. Immortals from the great body of water. Now, what great body of water are they talking about? I believe that the great body of water that held the Aryans was the ark, or the place of the ark above us. That great body of water that is arched above us, the place of the arch waters, the place of the gods like Icke or Yah, who are synonymous with being the water bearer, or synonymous with being from the waters. As a matter of fact, a lot of ancient cultures, they talk about, their gods coming from the waters or going into the waters. These beings, these Aryans or these elves or gods or whatever you'd like to call them, they came from the waters above. That's what I think Aristotle is referencing. The Pelasgians, which were the beings from the great body of water.
Aristotle was the student of Plato, and then became the teacher to a young man known as Alexander the Great. Once again, Aristotle wrote that Arcadia in Greece, before being inhabited by the Hellenes, had a population of Pelasgians, and that these aborigines occupied the land already before there was a moon in the sky above the earth. For this reason, they were called the Prosellenes. There was also another man named Anaxagoras, who was said to be the first to bring philosophy and the spirit of scientific inquiry to ancient Greece, and another man named Democritus, considered by many to be the father of modern science. Both taught that there was a time when the earth was without the moon. Giordano Bruno, 16th century Italian philosopher, writes, Theodorus writes in his first book that the moon had appeared a little while before the war which was fought by Hercules against the giants. Apollonius of Rhodes, a library at the Great Library of Alexandria, writer of Jason and the Argonauts, mentions the time when not all the orbs were yet in the heavens, before the Danai and Deucalion races came into existence, and only the Arcadians lived, of whom it is said that they dwelt on mountains and fed on acorns before there was a moon. Similarly, the famous Roman poet Ovid wrote, The Arcadians are said to have possessed their land before the birth of Jove, and their folk is older than the moon. Not all the orbs yet in the heavens, before the birth of Jove? By orbs, they mean the lights in the sky that we call planets, and by Jove, they mean the planet Jupiter. If there was a time before the moon, could there also have been a time before the planets? Emmanual Velikovsky, a noted historian, psychiatrist, and psychoanalyst, wrote a book called Worlds and Collisions. According to Velikovsky, not only was there a time before the moon, but a time before Venus as well. He wrote about how he believed that not too long ago in ancient history, many, if not all, of the planets were much closer to the Earth, appearing much bigger in the sky above us. He theorized that given the nearness and proximity, the planets had strange interactions with one another and the Earth below. His work was catching fire so quickly that by 1974, the American Association for the Advancement of Science felt obliged to address the situation by bringing Carl Sagan on TV in order to critique Velikovsky's theories. It's also worthy of note that in the 40s, before he even came out with this book, Emmanuel Velikovsky produced a work called Cosmos Without Gravitation, in which, by reasoning, logic, and deduction, he put forth that gravity simply cannot exist. Now, following in Velikovsky's footsteps, I came across something called the Purple Dawn Theory, spearheaded by Troy McLaughlin. Basically, the Purple Dawn Theory says that once, a long time ago, in a golden age of the gods, that the planet Saturn was much nearer to our world, and it gave off a purple light and a glow that changed the colors of everything that we see around us. Now, if the ancient elven gods, as I believe them to have been, the elves of old, are represented as blue gods in many of the world's writings today, could it be that they were really the albino-looking gods of old turned blue by an ancient blacklight in the sky called Saturn? Moving forward, the Thunderbolts project, led by David Talbot, put forth the electric universe idea onto YouTube and other websites. They basically said that as these ancient planetary bodies were so much nearer to our realm that we live on today, that as they came near to one another and the Earth, that they gave off electrical discharge between them, and they seemed to war in the sky. They gave the thunderbolts of the gods. These were massive thunderbolts between planetary bodies and between them and our world. The Thunderbolts Project puts forth a compelling case that many, if not all, of the craters that we see on bodies like the moon and even on the surface of our own realm were produced by electronic discharge. These were the thunderbolts of the gods, giant lightning strikes of massive proportions. Have you ever seen an obelisk? There's 3 reasons that we're given as to why they may exist. The first is they take a familiar shape of a certain body part of an ancient god. I don't see it. The second is that they represent one of the crafts of the alien gods. Maybe we're getting closer. The third is that they're sun rays, paying homage to the god of the sun, shooting his own rays back up at him. I put forth the theory that these obelisks were stationed in particular places across the realm in order to draw the thunderbolts of the gods down upon us. Perhaps it was to keep the thunderbolts directed away from populous areas and major cities, or perhaps it was to harness the energy that came from them. And when the gods or planets had left, the people brought the obelisks back within their walls to pay homage to a time lost and forgotten to us today. Or as Morpheus on the movie The Matrix said to Neo, "We don't know who started the war, but we know this. It was us who torched the sky." Zulu legend says that the moon was brought here by the Python people, aka the Elven race, Elohim, Elu, Azir, Silica race, etc., etc. Perhaps it's no coincidence that Aristotle referred to the Arcadians as the Aboriginal fathers that once inhabited the land before there was a moon. And the Aborigines in Australia worship the snake and cover themselves in pure white paint. It seems clear that what has happened in our past is far more amazing than what we've been led to believe. The critics of Velikovsky call it comparative mythology. I call it putting the pieces back together. The question that begs an answer remains. Why was the moon introduced? I have a few theories. Here are 3 of them. Number 1. The moon and the sun were introduced as weapons in the war against the Titans. The sun may have been a factor in turning the Titans or trolls in the ancient world to stone. The moon is blamed for making people crazy, lunatics, loony, lunar, and brings out the base nature or werewolf in man. It emits a cold light. We've been conditioned to think that if we didn't have the moon, life would not survive here on Earth. We've been conditioned to think that we need the moon. We don't. Number 2, it's a trap. The moon literally pulls in heat and therefore energy toward it. Some have speculated that it may be a disruptor of the reincarnation cycle, the literal light at the end of the tunnel upon death, which aims at sending the soul back to Earth prematurely before the soul can shed all of its prior identity. It also may be involved in strengthening the veil of forgetfulness called Maya by the Hindus, which covers soul energy upon re-entry, so as to forget prior experience and knowledge. If there are worlds and planes of existence above, below, and surrounding this realm, and the winners of the war against the Titans wanted to ensure that negative energy would not escape physically or in the ethereal dimension, this would be a good tool to ensure that it stays that way. Of course, it may be possible that the tool may have become corrupted, hijacked, glitched, etc. And number 3, the Watchers theory. The elven or god race of beings locked themselves in the moon, and they were able to watch the state of this realm from the moon, and perhaps some were left behind, until humanity has had every chance to evolve and grow, and the day comes when the elven race returns and this realm is purified and prepared for the return to the state that it was once in a time when the moon was not needed, back in ancient oblivion, in the time we refer to as paradise, in a time before there was a moon.
Forward.
We're going to be talking about the reality behind the legends and the myths and the stories of what we call the elves or the elven race. We see them all the time. It permeates our society and our fantasy cartoons and movies and books and all of these things. Elves are behind the scenes all over the place. And I'm going to break it down. We're going to study the etymology of the word elves, how it relates to the El or the Elohim or the ancient gods, and we're going to keep on going and build momentum in order to connect a lot of puzzle pieces today. So thank you for joining me, and let's get started. Whenever you think of elves, when you have thought about elves or an elf in the past, do you think about things like Keebler cookies and elves making cookies in trees, or Elf on the Shelf, or maybe a bunch of nerds all getting together playing Dungeons and Dragons, and they all talk about elves and they're very interested in it? Or maybe the Lord of the Rings or something fantastic like that, something not very serious or believable. Now, for those of you Dungeons and Dragons players, I do also from time to time play Dungeons and Dragons, so that's not a put down. I am in fact a nerd, okay? I'm a nerd, I'm a dork, I'm a geek, I'm all of those things. Very much a black sheep and a stranger in this realm. But I'm a stranger who loves to share things, and I'm going to share some insights about the elves with you all right now. We're going to start at the top of this. At the very top, you can see some glyphs, some symbols that I've written down. This top one up here is ancient Phoenician. It's 2 symbols written from right to left. Now, a long time ago, it's my theory that people used to write all the time with their left hand, which means they would go from the right all the way to the left so as not to smear the ink or to ruin the clay tablets as they went. That being said, since most people wrote with their left hand, that means that they were right-brained dominant. If you're right-brain dominant, that means that your creative side is opened up. Your imaginative side is opened up. And that's something that I think we've really lost, as at some point in time, somebody decided to force everyone to write with their right hand, making us left-brained dominant, very focused, very involved in mathematics and laws and the non-creative side. Now, obviously it's best to be balanced, but that's an entirely different video. Anyways, this is written from right to left. The first character you see here looks like a bull's head or the head of an ox, which is exactly what it is. Now, ancient men would actually draw out an entire ox, and that would be their picture. That would be their glyph for the meaning that they were trying to convey. Now, time man started writing so much that they developed shorthand. So instead of drawing out an entire body and legs and getting very detailed about it, they only would draw the head with the horns, because that's really all you needed. This conveys strength, right? The ox is the leader. It's a strong animal. It's full of muscle, so it conveys strength or dominance. This over here is simply a shepherd's staff. It's a staff, you know, if you've ever seen Little Bo Peep, she has her little curved staff. All of the ancient Egyptian gods walked around with staffs. The staff conveys leadership, and that's really what it means. So here you have a sentence written in ancient Phoenician. It means strong leader. Now, I'm going to get into that here in just a bit, but this became more and more shorthand until basically people would draw it. They would draw it like that, and then they would draw it like that, and then it sort of went sideways, and they would draw it like that. That's how this became that, okay? And that's an entirely different video, but that's the short version of this. Now this, you might notice, as we switched from writing left-handed to right-handed and going from right to left, and we wrote from left to right, this glyph right here became our letter A, which means alpha or strength or strong. And that's a little history. It is important to know before we go on. Now, we have the letter A, and then this shepherd's staff became our letter L, right? It looks very similar. So A and L are strong leader. It became these 2 words here in modern English, al or all or L. This right here takes the place of almost all of the vowels. So you can say it various ways based on dialect and pronunciation and things of that nature. So al means strong leader. Ale, which is how you pronounce that, ale. Ale means strong leader. This word became what we call today the word God. Okay, so our strong leader, El, it's actually written like that in many of the ancient languages, especially Hebrew and Phoenician. It is written time after time as El. Now, some people across the world, they might say Allah, and then they sort of pronounce it with a strong L. So it comes across like this. Allah, Allah, right? Just like in Hebrew, a little baby would call his father, the word Ab means father, but children would say Abba, Abba. Allah is the same pronunciation of the word al, or el, or al. Allah, it means God, it means strong leader. Now, el in Hebrew or ancient Phoenician, if you pluralize it, and keep in mind this is a very short version, right? Elohim. This basically right here is pluralizing the El. This means many El, many strong leaders, many gods. Keep that in mind because we're going to come back to that. It's going to help us to understand other words that we use today. Now we're going to move on to this next section. You may have seen this symbol right here written in various things like the word ether. Right? You may have seen it spelled that way. Now, this symbol is called the Ash or the Oz, which also can be written like this, A-E together and then S, Oz, Oz. Now, it also came to be written like this, Oz or Oz. Like I said, you got to keep in mind the vowels are very interchangeable across dialect and pronunciation and languages and things of that nature. That's how we get different languages. People were trying to force vowels, but like I said, it's a different video. Anyways, this is the Oz, right? The A-E, the Ash, conveys the meaning of spirit, breath, air, things of that nature, things that are invisible but moving, okay? Like your breath, like the spirit inside of you, like the air above us and around us, like the ether or the aether or the author, however you want to say it. Now, whenever you put the S sound or the Z at the end of it, it conveys spirit, but it also conveys strength. So this literally means a strong spirit, or by extension, a long life. A very long life, or by extension again, an immortal, the Oz, right? Now, some of you might already be making the connection to the Wizard of Oz. Why is it called Oz? You know, well, now we have a better understanding. The place of the immortals, the Emerald City, and we'll get into that a little bit later too. But Oz, those of the immortals, right? Now, the Azir is from Nordic folklore, Nordic stories from like the ancient northern countries where they would talk about the Azir in this book called the Eddas, which is basically a compilation of stories and legends and history that is not to be taken as fiction but as fact and reality, and the way that prehistory was before it was handed to us on a silver platter saying this is how we want you to remember it. Now, the Azir were the gods. The IR right here is just plural. That's all it is. It's pluralizing this right here, right? It means the gods. It's the same word as Elohim, right? It means the gods, the mighty ones, the strong leaders, the many strong leaders that once existed. So keep all this in mind. It's all going to make sense, and we're going to tie it together here in a minute. Now, if you look down a little bit further, I'm going to explain how we got our letter V today. Now, if you're in conspiracy circles, or you're very big into language and etymology, this is going to interest you, because we see the letter V as being symbolic in a lot of books and movies and things like that. Some of you might remember the movie called V, and it's very much ties into what we're talking about today. But the letter V started off as a picture just like these. The letter V means and conveys the picture of a hook, right? Always means a hook. And the hook conveys the meaning of being attached to something or of something, right? I am of this place, or I am of these people. I am attached to this place or these people. The letter V can mean the word and, meaning including, attached to, all of that. Now, it is important to know that the letter V also came from these same exact letters that mean the same exact thing. The letters U, double U, which is when you write U twice and you just say the U sound longer. And then through dialect, V also became, or I'm sorry,
as it was written. It's double V. That's how we write W sometimes. It's a V sound. That's why you hear people from some European countries, they will say their W's as a V, like watermelon. You know, if you listen to Dracula or something, like, that's a great example of how he pronounces the letter V or the letter U as a hard V sound. And anyways, the hardest V sound comes across as an F. They are very much interchangeable. This is one of the origins of the letter F, and it's very important to know that F is interchangeable with V, and the meaning of being attached to or hooked on to something else. And we'll get into the hook symbolism a little bit later as well. So let's make a word, right? Let's make a word that's related to our topic, which is the elves. Let's take the hook, which means attached to, and then let's take the A-E-R, air. It just happens to be the word air, like the air, the life, the breath around us, right? The spirit. So attached to or of the spirit, right? Or A-E-R. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me explain R real quick. Sorry. R in the picture form means head or the top of the body. Okay. So the A-E means the spirit. The R right here. Can you guys see that? Is that too low? Oh, you can't even see that. Let me put that down a little bit. Okay, there we go. You're like, what are you talking about? Okay, so attached to the head spirit, right? Or the lead spirit, or the lead immortal, the leader immortal, and then the I. The I at the end of a word basically just means possession. It means me or my or mine, okay? So if we go attached to my lead spirits, my immortals, we pronounce that as V-E. The I is pronounced like a hard E sound. V'eri. Now if we take the V and we replace it with the harder F sound, we get F'eri. We get the word fairy, right? Like your fairy tales, the legends of the fairy people, the fairy folk, fairy godmother. This is exactly where the word fairy comes from when you break the word down. It is attached to the lead spirit, my lead spirits, my lead immortals, basically. And it means fairy. It comes across as that word. It's synonymous with the elven people. I don't know how many people know that fairies and elves are pretty much the same thing. Now, we have separated them into different classes of cartoonish looking versions of what they really are. But, for example, if you watch The Hobbit or The Lord of the Rings, some people who didn't like the elves, they had a special name for them. It was an insult. They would call them fairies. Oh, you fairy? Like a girly elf, right? A feminine elf. But it was only for the elves. To call a human fairy would not be an insult. You know, I mean, it was specifically for elves. So we get the word fairy. Now, let's drop the V, right? Oh, we have to go down a little more. All right, here we go. Let's drop the V. Let's start with the immortal, the word for immortal or strong spirit, and then put possession on it, my, me or my, and then we add the O-N, on, right? O-N, typically at the end of many words, it means having to do with, belonging to, or of thee. Of thee, as in belonging to a group of people or belonging to a land, okay? So we have the immortals, my immortals, or of my immortals, because a lot of times you have to actually read it backwards, just like in Spanish or other languages. They kind of say things backwards, but they make sense. So this is er y on. Arion or Aryan, right? Now, you know, try not to get all in your feelings about saying the word Aryan. That can be a trigger word for many people these days because we live in such a politically correct society that we can't talk about fat people or Aryans or race or
black people or elves or whatever it may be, okay? But the Aryans were these strangers in that were talked about in the early parts of a sacred writing called the Vedas. The Vedas are the historical and legendary stories and history of basically the people in India, right? Or the Hindus. The Hindus have the Vedas, right? Just like the British have the Eddas. Or in Hindu, they have the Vedas, and in British land, whatever it's called, the Brits, they have the Eddas. Same thing. They're just the compilation of stories of history of things that really did happen. In both of these, the Vedas talk about the Aryans, right? The Aryans were these albino, large beings that came down and basically brought cultivation and agriculture and history and math and knowledge and the primitive people who existed in that area at the time, according to the Vedas, the Hindu writings. Now, the Eddas do talk about the similar people, but they don't really call them Aryans. They call them the Azir, right? Same exact thing, the Azir. So, the Azir were basically the gods. And typically, they are the white gods. And when I say white gods, I'm not talking about human white, right? I'm not talking about racism and anything like that. I'm talking about close to being sort of albino white. I mean very pale white, right? Like we see whenever we watch the movies and they portray vampires or elves, or if you've seen the movie Prometheus, those alien beings that were bald and very buff and large and extremely albino. That's a great example of what these beings may have looked like, as well as the Aryan beings as well. And that gets into a whole nother trail of breadcrumbs, but we're going to go back to up here. Now, remember, like I said, the letter V can also be the letter U, right here. So, of or attached to. If we go to the L and we put a U, it means of the L, or attached to the mighty leaders, the strong leaders, or aka the gods, attached to the gods. Elu or Elu, however you want to pronounce it. Now, right now, if you guys have a computer, I want you to jump on Google real quick and just type in ELU of the 9, right? Now, what is that? Just a side note, just because it's interesting. Some of these secret societies that are not really secret at all, and that's a whole different video I'll be doing, right? But like the Scottish Rite, Freemasons, they actually have degrees, and each degree or every level that you become as you advance in your so-called knowledge, they give you a title. One of those titles is the Elu. Elu, if you Google it, it will tell you it means elected leader, right? Or the El acted, the L who takes action. I think that's where our word elected actually comes from, right? I'm just sort of speculating right there, but that makes a lot of sense to me. The Elu. Now, we can replace the U very easily with the V, and we get Elv, right? Of the gods, or of God, or of the mighty leaders. We can also replace it with a hard F, the elf. It all depends on dialect. It all depends on where you were and how people spoke and how hard they made their vowels and their consonants sound. This is all the same word. It is the word for the ancient gods, the ancient strangers who came into our world and changed history and created everything and set the stage for where we are today. Now, let's get even more deep, right? Let's go back to the AL form. Remember, I said if you put the I, let's go back to the I, down here. The I is possession, right? It means me or my. So let's put an I on Al. Ali. right? Some of you already recognize that as a word. Ali, it means my leader, my God, my strength, right? My strong leader. But if you put down here, remember I said O-in means of or from, right? If we put the O-in on it, we now have this, Alion, or Ale. This is actually pronounced Ale. This is also pronounced Ale, depending on where you were from. This in Hebrew is literally not pronounced L, but ale, like A-L-E, right? Like you drink ale. Ale-e-on. Now, we can change the spelling because that's what we've done for millennia. We change the spelling to suit our speech and our dialect and our alphabet. So we change the O to an E, and now we have the word alien. Ale-e-on means from my gods, or pertaining to the gods, my strong leaders, etc. Those who were not here and then showed up out of nowhere. These are the aliens, the alien, okay? That is where we get the word alien. The aliens are the exact same as the fairies, the Vaerions, the Arians, the Azir, those from the land of Oz, the land of the immortals, those who don't seem to die in comparison with us who live such short lifespans. Elves are known for living for at least 1,000 years. Back to a time when people lived much longer. So this is alien, right? Now I'm going to switch gears even more for a minute. We're going to talk about aliens, okay? Let's talk about the aliens. When we talk about aliens today, it is so cartoonified. Our concept of, you know, these gods, these aliens all coming from everywhere in these little spaceships, and they're little green men, which is interesting. And we're going to talk about how green is a color associated with the elven race, the elven people as well. But it's a ridiculous concept. It sounds crazy, but there is truth to it. There's truth to everything, and it falls to us to try to put the breadcrumbs together, to try to put those pieces of that fractured bigger picture together in order to sort of make sense of what has happened, where we are today, and what will happen in the future. So anyways, let's talk about aliens, right? The al or al-e-on. Aliens. We'll put an S just to pluralize it. Aliens. Now, some ancient races, tribes, and peoples from all around the realm have given us stories of aliens. And many of you have watched Ancient Aliens. I know you have. Used to be my favorite show. I still enjoy catching it every once in a while. I loved the guy with the crazy hair. You know, every episode, his hair just got like crazier and bigger. And then there's the other guy who says like, of ancient Anunnaki were the gods. Anyways, okay, I'm just joking around. But you've seen Ancient Aliens, right? Now, in the show Ancient Aliens and many other books, some tribes spoke about these aliens as being the fish gods, right? The gods of the fish. That's our symbol for the fish. Or really, it should be written like that because they were walking. These are the legs. This is not a fin. It's not closed off, okay? That's a closed off fish. That's actual fish. This right here, this is a fish with legs, okay? Which is how it started off. Which is also why we have those ribbons. Back of everyone's car, they have these ribbons that just happen to be in this exact shape. That's where that comes from, okay? It harkens back to the fish gods, okay? Now, why did they call them the fish gods? Well, it's because, now I'm going to give you a little bit of my own opinion here, and I'm speculating a little bit, but I'm also using reasoning and a lot of breadcrumbs that I've followed in order to help make sense of this. The ancient peoples would look upon these elves or elven race or Elohim or Azir or whatever you would like to call them, and they recognized that while they had a similar appearance and structure, while they were humanoid with arms and legs,
composed differently than the humans were composed. They had a different look to them. Some called them the shining ones, the shining gods, and many reported that they had scale-like skin. Their skin seemed tougher and sort of scaly to the sight, right? So they were shiny and they were sort of scaly. So what is primitive man, or whatever they were, what do they automatically do? Instead of thinking, instead of being able to have dialogue and ask them, what's your skin made out of? Why are you different than me? They just jump to the conclusion they look like fish. Fish have scales, and these people have scales, so they must be fish gods, right? Or some people call them the Dogon. Dog, right? It's actually pronounced dog, means fish, okay? Fish. And then O-N, like I said before down here, O-N means of the, right? Of the fish, okay? The Dogon. There's actually a tribe in Africa called the Dogon tribe. Now, I'll tell you an interesting story about the Dogon tribe. They say that these fish gods came down and tried to speak with them. And one of the first things they did is they pointed up at the sky, and they pointed at a particular star system called the Dog Star. Okay, that's why we have the dog days of summer. The Dog Star Sirius is out. And they would point to the star system Sirius, and they would tell them, there's actually a couple stars right there, 2 or 3 stars. That's where we're from. Tribal people, primitive man, well, they're from way out there. They live on that star, right? They live on that light. They are from that light right there. Now, here's my theory on that. And I'm going to go into this in other videos. But my theory is that we live on a realm, a flat plane of existence. Not only do I think we live on a flat world, a plane of existence, I also think that there are other planes much higher and lower than where we are now. And to access them, one literally would go up plane, or one literally would go down to go to the next plane. Now, that plane of existence, in order to figure out how to get to the portal that leads to that realm or that plane of existence above us, they would use the stars as a mapping system to know where those windows in the heavens were. There were certain openings up there. Speculate and theorize that that's exactly what those fish gods were doing when they said, we came from right there. Or if you've ever seen Peter Pan, right? We're going to talk about a few mythical characters. We're going to talk about Peter Pan. Peter Pan, if he wants to go to Neverland, and he's here on this plane of existence called Earth, right? He's in London or wherever, and he wants to go to Neverland, he goes up every time, okay? Neverland in the cartoons and in Peter Pan is never described as like, in space, okay? But he says to get to Neverland, you have to something to the effect of, it's the 3rd star from the left and straight on until morning. Peter Pan uses the stars as a map of how to find the portal to get to that other realm. Now, just as a side note, I'll make other videos, but I speculate that those realms are separated by water, okay? So there's like an ocean of water somehow above us, and there's one right here where we are, and if you go through that one, you'll end up in another realm as well. If you've ever seen Moana, you know that Moana jumped into the realm of monsters through the ocean and dropped through the bottom of the ocean into a land that had air and oxygen, and she could breathe and everything. Same thing when you go up, okay? Now, keep in mind, Peter Pan is an elf, okay? Peter Pan is an El. He is an Elohim. He is the Elu or Elv or any of those. And you know how you can tell? First of all, the elves have pointy ears, right? You can't help but to notice them unless they are cloaked. They're wearing something like this to hide their ears. They have certain genetic markers that you can tell that is an El. That
That's an elf. That's an elu, okay? He had pointy ears. Peter Pan has pointy ears. If you Google it right now, you can see. Now, they tried to turn him into a human with the new movies and whatnot, but no, I'm sorry. He's an elf. Not only does he have pointy ears, but he wears green. All green. The color green is also associated with the elven people. Let's go back to the Wizard of Oz, right? The Emerald City, right? Or the Emerald Isle, the place of emerald green. Okay, green, that emerald color of green has something to do with the elven race, the gods, or magic, or things of that nature. All these are very interrelated. So Peter Pan. Peter Pan is an elf, okay? And he wears this color green, and he has pointy ears, okay? And green is associated with Oz and magic, and a lot of times when you're watching movies and some sort of crazy magic is involved, you know, something mysterious, you'll see like this sort of green ether everywhere. Also in Sleeping Beauty, it's extremely prevalent there. But anyways, who else has pointy ears and seems to live for a very long time and is extremely knowledgeable, but our good friend from Star Trek, Mr. Spock? Star Trek. Spock, I'm convinced, is also an elf. All of these elves, all of these elven beings, these gods, these Anunnaki or white gods or Aryans or Vanir or however you want to call them, they're all the same thing. But Spock is an elf. And I'll tell you why. First of all, his ears give it away. He's got these pointy ears. The elven race seems to have had pointy ears and some other things like scaly skin and very strong and very lived for a very long time. They were the immortal ones, okay? But Spock is extremely knowledgeable. Now, the elven race, the gods, were said to live for eons. They were immortals, right? They had strong spirit, long life. They lived for so very long compared to us today. You and I, right now, babies. No matter how old you are, you die. We all die as a baby. We don't really know anything. We haven't gotten our hands dirty. Some people think that they've been around the block or they've learned a thing or two. You've learned next to nothing in comparison to what the gods knew, simply because they had so much more time to experience, to learn, to soak it all in, and they would master their emotions. They would not allow, some of them, not all of them, of course, but they would not allow their emotions or their passions to rule over their reasoning. Excuse me. Their ability to reason things out, because they've learned so much. They can like think so many steps ahead that they don't need to just simply react through raw emotion like we do, like children, like babies, okay? So this means that a being that has lived for so long, that's just very comprised, right, can come off as sort of cold or distant or detached. And this is something that the elves have had as well. They seem to be incapable of emotion or passion, when in reality, they're just masters of it. They have mastered their passions and their emotions. And sometimes it slips out depending on the individual, but most of them in general, it just comes naturally. It's maturity. But that coldness can come across as cold-blooded. Or now, if you take cold-blooded and you mix it with scaly skin and the color green getting involved, now we have the legends that have come about, the stories and the cartoon version of the elves called the reptilians, right? The reptilian alien race, the alien, the El-Eon, right? The reptilians, the lizard people. It's just as ridiculous as the fish people. It's the same exact thing. You know, we take what we think we know, you know, our world here, we take our basic childlike knowledge and we go, oh, that reminds me of a fish, so it must be a fish person. Or that reminds me of a lizard, you know. associated with the color green, they have scales, and they're very cold and reserved. So they must be lizard people, right? That, to me, as I assume it would be to them, right? Now, many of you out there watching, you may have stumbled across the theory of evolution and Darwinism, and how many people say that because monkeys look just like us, you know, they look very humanoid, right? I like pretending to be a monkey sometimes. It's fun. But anyways, monkeys look like us, right? And so we must come from monkeys, right? Which is funny. Not monkeys come from us. And monkeys are just like humans that just totally de-evolved back into such basic beings that they became animals, which to me would actually make more sense. But no, no, no. We're taught that monkeys turned into and evolved into humans because we seem like them. Now, if that concept is as ridiculous or offensive or humorous to all of you, think about how ridiculous or humorous or insignificant the concept of being a fish person or a reptile person would be to these beings. Okay, that is so so many words. It's disrespectful. It's it doesn't seem to be anywhere near something that our reasoning would tell us about these beings, right? They would probably pity us for thinking something so cartoonish of them. Not only that, but oh my gosh, can you imagine how brilliant most of them were? Just because they lived for so long and they had so much experience on life and everything. So anyways, why did they have scales, right? Let's talk about the Ale, or the elves, the Elu, right? The Azir, those from Oz, etc., and so on and so on. Why did they have scales? Well, I've been looking into various things about our prehistory, our actual prehistory, not dinosaurs and millions of years and volcanoes and all this weird stuff that we are taught. I'm talking about hidden history that has made its way and has just succeeded in keeping up with us, even though we've tried to forget it, even though it's been lost to us, even though people have burned it and ripped it up and thrown it away. The truth continues to come back in some way, shape, or form. We have kept the truth in the form of legends and myths and fantasies and movies and books and all of these wonderful things. And I feel like the time has come for many of us who are waking up to put these pieces back together and to recognize, using the right side of our brain, our creative abilities, our imagination, and the left side of our brain, our reasoning, our ability to deduce things based on facts and information and clues that we see all around us, instead of just taking the world for granted, to examine the world and to fill in the gaps and to reconstruct things and to be able to envision it in your mind and see history unfolding before you, to see how your world got to where it is and where you really live and what you are really a part of and where you are really going. That's exciting. Doesn't that make the world that you live in today so much more interesting and exciting? So that's one of the reasons why I'm here, to share that with you, and hopefully it'll help to open up your minds, so to speak, right? We want to help Fantasia to grow. Anyways, so let's get back to what I was talking about. Why do they have scales? Theorize, with many others, that the beings back then were comprised altogether differently than we are today. Today we are carbon-based beings, right? But the next step up from that, speaking, is silica. Maybe this was a world in which beings and plant life and other things were not based on carbon, which fell as a state chemically from a silica state, right? And silica is like, if you think about crystals and things like that, that's more along the lines of silica. If you actually look at your skin, those of you who have really good eyesight, or if you look at skin under a microscope, it actually still looks like scales. It's just so much smaller, okay? But these beings had scaly type skin that was noticeable, okay? And today, For example, Thor. Thor is one of the Azir. He's one of the Els. He's one of the strong leaders. Thor or Thor. He goes by many names: Indara, Indra, Thor, the god of the lightning. Okay, Thor was this extremely strong, buff god. And today, if you watch the Avengers movies and you look at his armor, he doesn't need armor. Okay, he's Thor. His getup, his costume is scales. He has actual scales on him, and I'll put a clip of him in another video because I'm going to reference him in a few other videos. But Superman, if you Google Superman's suit on the new movies they're coming out with, it's like little diamond scales everywhere. What if these beings were comprised of silica? What if they actually had a tougher skin to them? What if they were just made stronger than we are today? Because our chemical state has entered into a fallen state. It's fallen down, and now we're carbon-based instead of silica-based. Maybe that's why these heroes, which is another word I'll get into some other time, these ancient gods, these heroes, these elven race, these aliens, whatever you want to call them, they're seen as having super powers, super strength. They were much bigger, so they had a longer stride. They could run much faster and go much faster. Let's see, what else? Sorry, I totally lost my train of thought. So anyways, I'm actually doing a video right now about the sun, the skylight, and how it relates to Superman and the elves and how they may have gotten their power. They may have received power from that particular light source. Please check out that. I'm spending a lot of time editing it and stuff, but it's going to be a really interesting video. I'm going to be talking about the Titans and how the sun may have been introduced as a weapon in order to hinder the Titans, or even maybe help to kill them off, or strengthen those elves, those elven race, those superheroes, those Superman's name is Kal-El. I don't want to reveal too much in my video early, but anyways, it has to do with astrology and how this affect us in reality today, and how much more it may have affected these beings, and that maybe that's where we get Superman and things like that. What else do I want to talk about? Oh, leprechaun. I'm going to talk about leprechauns real quick. That's why I wrote it up here, to remind myself. I'm going to go ahead and spell it out because we're going to see how leprechauns are related to elves and the gods. So let's go ahead and get rid of the word alien, and we're going to spell out leprechaun. Let's spell it in green just because we're having so much fun. I hope. I've not looked at the chat at all. So after the whole leprechaun bit, we're going to jump into the chat. I'm going to answer questions. So think of some questions that you might have in relation to the topic, please. Okay. So let's write out leprechaun. Leprechaun. I think you guys can probably see that, right? If not, we'll go ahead and write in darker color. So here's the word leprechaun. Absolutely related to fairies or Vaeries or the Aryans or the elves or the El or the Elohim. And I'm going to break it down right now and show you why. It's two words. It's the word leper, right? Now, think to yourself for a minute. What's a leper? What word sounds like leper? Leprosy, right? Leprosy is an ancient disease where people's skin would sort of flake off, and you did not want to go near to the leper. You stayed away from the leper, okay? So the word leper carries the connotation of stay away, right? So leper and then con, C-H-U-N. Now, think about this. The leprechaun, if you look at Lucky Charms, that is an elf. He wears green. I mean, yes, he's a leprechaun, but he's also an elf. And I'll show you why. The word con, various ways, can be spelled like that. Con. You may have seen like the Wrath of Khan in Star Trek or whatnot, but it can also be spelled like this. This is the more popular way to spell it because it's actually a popular last name in Jewish communities. This Kohen, literally means priest. So let me adjust this and we'll write up here. This means priest. Okay? Khan means priest in all of its forms. Leper, the stay away priest. Stay away from those priests. Now, here's an interesting little tidbit just to put the icing on the cake, so to speak, or the cherry on top. Leper in Latin literally means scaly, right? Or having scales. Just like, you know who, sorry, I didn't mean to like use my middle finger, but just like the El or the Elven race or Thor or any of these people, they had scales, or they seemed to have scales, right? They had a different skin type than we do today. This means scales or scaly. The priests of the scales, or the scaly priests. Now, here's what's even more interesting. Ancient priests of all around, in every religion, of every history, all of the priests, the entire priesthood's job was to serve the Els, was to report to the El, or the El, or the Elohim, or the Azir, or the Vanir, or the fairies, or the whatever you would like to call them. The priests were the servants, the ones who served and reported to the El. What was their job? Well, it was a priesthood that became a kingdom or a kinghood, a kingship, right? Their job was to look over all of these humans, look over all of these babies. These beings lived for thousands of years. Humans do not. And humans multiplied and multiplied and multiplied and just got more and more of a populace, to the point at which the gods, the elven race, basically said, forget this. Like, I'm not wasting all of my time to answer all of these pitiful questions and to help these poor race of beings who are still in their early stages of development out. That's a waste of my time. I'm going to do something smart, and I'm going to appoint a priest to look over them, to we will teach them from time to time, like once a year or something. And the priest, they can deal with those humans. They can have a leader. That leader can come to us, and then we'll spend a little bit of time talking to the priest, right? Now, the priests would also, depending on what you believe, collect things that the gods, or the El, or the gods, or however you want to say it, they would collect things like gold, and they would bring it to the gods. They would go on missions for the gods. They would go build things for the gods. They would do all of this for the gods. But one of the things that they always had, without fail, every time, was gold. For some reason, and I'm not going to get into Zecharia Sitchin's theories right now on the Anunnaki. That's for another video. But basically, the gods were renowned for wanting gold, to make things out of gold. And gold has various properties that we all know a little bit more about today. But the priests were sure to be carrying gold, right? So, Kohens, these scaly priests, if you caught one, you could be sure they probably had some gold on them. Or if you found out where they lived, you would know where they stockpiled their gold in order to give it to the elven race, the gods, right? Here's another thing. The priests also interceded for mankind from time to time, every once in a while when they thought it was important, and they would ask favors of the gods to intercede on behalf of the humans, right? So if you, in theory, caught one of these leprechauns who was sure to have gold, you also could make a request of him to be granted by the El, or the Elu, or the Elohim. Basically, you could make, right? If you caught a leprechaun, you could make a wish. They would have gold. Their color is green. They're elven. They report to the elves, even if they're not elves. So, Let me just check some of my notes here to see if I have anything else before we jump into the question and answer portion here. I think we talked about a lot of stuff. Oh, I did skip Santa Claus, so I'll mention that real quick, right? I'm sure some of you, when you think of elves, you think of the elves of Santa Claus. Now, while that is ridiculous and absurd and childlike to believe in that particular story, it doesn't mean that it's absolutely not true. There are breadcrumbs and little grains of truth. Everything is truth. It's just fractured truth. Okay? It's just tied into knots. It's all the truth, but we have to untie it. We have to put those fragmented pieces of truth back together to make sense of it. Use our creative side and our logical side together as a team. Now, Santa Claus, that whole story is real. Santa today is a big, fat, jolly human with magical powers. He didn't start off as a human. He's an elf. If you look up old pictures of Santa Claus, Santa is an elf. He lives amongst his elf buddies. He's one of the leaders of the elves, of the elven race, okay? But he lives up at the North Pole, where it is speculated there is actually some sort of entrance into one of these lower realms or other realms. Like I said, you can go up to access some realms or planes of existence, and you can go down to access some planes of existence. So, the story behind Santa and his elves has some truth to it. But yes, those are the elves. Hopefully this makes sense. Let me recap. The word el or ale, right? Also related to alien, the aliens, right? Also related to the people who live in Oz, the immortals. Also related and the same as the Azir, the strong ones, the immortal gods of old, of Nordic and Celtic and all these other legends of the North, right? Also related to the fairies, the Vaeries or the Erion, the Aryans. Also the hook. Now the hook is something interesting, okay? You're going to notice the hook everywhere. It's the V symbol that seems to be all over the place. They put it everywhere. But that's another video because that's a whole Saturn video, and that's going to talk about Saturn and stuff. I also did want to say on a side note, because I just remembered, if you ever watch Stranger Things, okay, great TV show on Netflix. I don't even watch TV, but I like that show. In Stranger Things, it goes into some really deep, hidden stuff, like the Montauk Project, and sort of touching on the Illuminati and the spiritual world, and all this type of stuff. Well, there's this girl with powers, right? She has these powers. She's different. She's a powerful girl, and her name is 11, right? Ale Evan, right? Or we could say her name is Elvin. She's Elvin. That's why she's called El, right? Same thing with if you've seen that new movie that just came out called Death Note. There's a character in there that only goes by the letter V, if you turn it that way. But his name is El. It harkens back to the Elu, the Elva, the elf, the elven people of old. But anyways, you'll start to see this in a lot of movies if you just pay attention. You'll see it in books and everywhere you go. The V is everywhere. The hook is everywhere. It's all very much interrelated. I think that we might have this whole Saturn thing a little bit. I think there might be another perspective to it, and I will make some videos about that. Also, the ancient sky and what was actually in our sky before the introduction of the sun, what we call the sun, and the moon and things of that nature, and what that was all like. And I'm going to include all of these upcoming videos on my Ancient Oblivion series. I want to thank everybody for watching. I hope I didn't forget anything or leave anything out. I'm sure there's so much more to talk about. Much stuff. I'm going to open it up to questions now, and I'll answer some questions here in just a minute. Looks like there's 45 people watching. That's awesome. That's great. Hello to everybody. And let me just open the chat because I can't see it right now. And I'm going to open it up to relevant questions about the topic or something near to the topic. Let me just get a drink. Okay. So that was a lot of information. I'm looking at the chat right now. G33 says, hi, Jay. Hello. Hello to everybody. Thank you all for sharing my videos. It blows my mind that I see my videos popping up on Facebook and other platforms, but that's cool. I'm glad. I'm glad that I have something to actually offer the world. Tommy Lee says, could you possibly break down Alon word? I'm sorry, buddy. I don't know what you're talking about. Alon. But I'm sure you could break it down based on what I just showed you, right? Evan says, hello, Jay. Glad you're back. Thank you. Dimitri says, do you believe in subterranean worlds and races? Absolutely. And if you rewind the video a little bit, I actually talk about how there are different planes of existence above us and below us. And yes, I absolutely think that there are beings on those planes as well, similar and altogether different than we are. Aquelas Ramirez says, have you read any material on psychedelics like DMT and mushrooms relating to machine elves? Yes, I have. If you read the works of, man, I totally just forgot the guy's name. But he writes about this guy named, dude, I'm having a brain fart. I'm so sorry. Adam's Truth Journey is here. What's up, Adam? I'm trying to remember the name of that book. If you guys remember, please help me out. It's about a guy who goes into Mexico, and he actually sits with and lives with a shaman, a medicine man, right, or a sorcerer, and he learns about how these drugs help him to see into another vibrational state. And in that vibrational state, he actually he sees these quote-unquote reptilian-type beings and things of that nature. And man, if I can remember the author or the name of the book, I'll let you know. I just feel pressured right now. Man, what was the name of that book? I forgot. I'm so sorry. But anyways, if somebody knows it, bring it up in the chat. I'm sure you could Google it and find it. Tommy Lee says, Lord of the Rings has all these fantasy races, and I do think some variation of all those races walked Earth at one point. And I agree with you. I think that the Lord of the Rings and its prequel, The Hobbit, and that prequel, The Silmarillion, you should definitely check out The Silmarillion. It talks about the Titans that once lived before the elves, before all these other races of little beings and giants and other things, that the Titans terraformed this world, and they came here, and there was this battle between them, and one of the main Titans sort of became a bad guy and sort of became selfish and dark and had his own agenda. Naz says, have you figured out how to get out of this realm? Easy. Thanks for asking. Food of the Gods, Terrence McKenna. No, that's not the book, but I'm sure that one's good too. Oh, what about Avatar, G33? Excellent point. Good movie. Now, Avatar is a perfect example of these godlike giant beings who were blue, right? They were blue. Why were they blue? On that planet. That whole movie, Avatar, is basically a sort of cartoon version of what really used to be here on Earth, what life was like. And I think my theory is that these white, elven, albino-looking alien beings were under a completely different light source that gave off a certain color spectrum, and they appeared to be blue. It looks like they were literally shining. They were the shining gods. Let's see. Let me make sure I didn't miss anybody here. Oh, Lori says, happy birthday. Thank you. Today is my birthday. I don't like to brag about it or anything, but yes, today's my birthday. Let's see. Vertaline says, do you think these beings on other realms are actually corporal beings or more light-based, higher vibrational beings? I think they're both. I think all of these realms have spirit beings, okay? They're just at different densities and vibrational states than we are. I also think that they're very physical. I don't think that the realms above and below are all too much different in the aspect of having dense physical matter and bodies. Thank you for everyone saying happy birthday. Thank you very much for. Yes, I was born a long time ago on this day and whatnot. Oh, that reminds me, as far as dates and times go, keep your eyes out on an upcoming video because I basically, gosh, I really hate to do like an end of the world video, even though I don't believe in the end of the world. I believe in time as being cyclical, and that there was an apocalypse worldwide or all throughout the realm that sort of destroyed a lot, but it also made way for growth and for new things to come in its path. And back in 2012, before December, there was all this hype about the Mayan calendar. I decided to write out on my own using all of the information I could think of. I did months and months of studying, trying to actually come up with my own timeline point and find out when that quote-unquote apocalypse or unveiling or catastrophe, if you want to call it that, would happen. And honestly, that's one of the reasons why I think I'm here, because I feel like I have something called spirit memory or energetic memory, okay? I feel like a stranger in the world around me. I mean, I know that I'm here, but I don't feel at home here. I feel like I know in my energy that I have lived during the times that I'm talking about right now, that I've experienced these things, and that I've been through a cataclysm before, and that, man, I'm probably here to go through another one. But that's okay, because I'm here to help people out. Age of Disclosure, hey, I love your videos. You're doing a great job. Keep up the good work. And thank you for saying happy birthday, along with everybody else. 33 is talking about Rh negative blood types. I absolutely am convinced that's where it comes from, okay? Blood types were different in these beings, and some of that blood type is passed on to us. Many of us are actually related to the El, or the Elven race, and that's why many of the elite or the elected people in the world today, they're so big on bloodlines and keeping their bloodlines pure, because they have this particular blood type. And it gets a little deeper into that, but that's a totally different video. Lori says, by the way, you need mods. Okay, well, I'll think about that in the future, but honestly, that's why I took a break from YouTube, because I'm focusing on the goal, you know what I mean? Because I'm very different. I don't know if you guys have noticed, and I'm not trying to come across as being holier than thou or better than anybody, but I am different. And it's very hard for people who are like myself to explain it, but I can feel a lot. I can sense a lot. I get information and energy from everywhere all at once, and it fluctuates. Sometimes it's extreme and it's intense. So I pick up on the density of the realm that I live in right now, and the energetic vibe and all that. That's why I had to take that little break. You know what I mean? So I'm not really going to focus on it, but if you want to, email me about it or whatnot. Okay, so life in an alternate universe says that they don't believe that they have the Rh negative blood. Oh, he or she is basically saying that they don't think that the elite have Rh negative blood type, and that's fine if that's your thoughts on that. I think that they do, and I guess I'll leave it at that. Rh negative blood does not guarantee that you're a good person. It just doesn't. It does not guarantee that you're more apt to be positive or helpful in the world today. But it does give you certain genetic predispositions that you can use as a tool in whatever energy type you have. That's how I feel about it. Okay. Does anybody have any other questions? I'm going to wrap things up. We'll give it 5 more minutes. Any questions about elves, prehistory? I will be talking about the Purple Dawn and the other skylights that used to be up in our atmosphere. I hope you guys are enjoying the videos that I've been putting out, and
I was thinking about making a series like very simple short videos for the flat earth, talking about flat earth theory. So I might do that. Just put out a bunch of real short clips like, hey, this is pretty simple. Kind of like the last one I did. All right, so I'm gonna answer one more question. Oh, G33, great question. G33 Imagination says, do I think that the firmament is cracking? Now, I think that the firmament, I think all of this is interrelated. All of these topics are related. I would highly advise watching my video about the sun. I think I called it the Revelation Sun, but I talk about how there seem to be some sort of separations between this plane of existence and the next plane of existence. Big Billy TV says, welcome back. Thank you, Big Billy. But there are separations between the different planes of existence. Now, I don't know what it is that's separating, but according to all of the writings that I've read, all of the ancient scriptures, and all of the little breadcrumbs and nuggets that I've picked up on over the years, it would indicate to me that sometime in the future, or the near present, something will happen where those windows up in the heavens, those windows up in the skies that allow access to those various realms, will open up. And that at that point in time, the beings that are restricted from entering into our realm and going back and forth, they will be able to enter into our realm. This has echoed in things like the movie The Avengers, where, you know, a portal in the sky opens up and all of these elven race beings come down. And, you know, it's you have to be very careful with that because it's a lot of conditioning. We're conditioned to fight the aliens, the Elion, right? We're conditioned to fight them because they're going to come and they're going to destroy us, and we need to fight them. Well, it seems to me that whoever's in charge of this world wants to stay in charge of this world, so they want all of their minions to run around thinking that we need to shoot and kill all the aliens, right? I'm not so sure that that's the truth. Also, in the Bible, it talks about the Lord, who is going to come back with thousands upon thousands of his angels and destroy a bunch of the world. Now, personally, I think that it's tied into whatever cataclysms may occur to sort of cause a wrinkle in time. By the way, good book and good movie, you should see that. But I think they're all interrelated. And I think a lot of it is going to do with energetic cleansing, okay? It's an energy. And like I said, I feel in my energy memory, in my spirit memory, that I was there when prior cataclysms befell this realm, and that there was all of this death, and the world was on the verge of collapse because it was so horrible. It was so bad. It was so dense that the earth itself, like, basically had to go through a cleansing process that we call cataclysm. And I will be talking about that sometime in the future as well. I'll just touch on it though. That world that once existed was so bad that it was on the verge of cataclysm. But, like I was telling one of my good friends the other night, that world, as bad as it was, still would have seemed like paradise to us today, because that world at least had passion. That world was alive. It was alive, and it had all the wrong directions and intentions, but it was alive. It was a world full of life. This world that we live in today, that's on the verge of cataclysm once again, this world is dead. This world is already full of zombies. You know, all these YouTubers are talking about the zombie apocalypse, and there's going to be zombies and this and that, and how it could happen. It's already here. It's a metaphor for what is actually going on. There are zombies around you. All of these things that we think are fantasy, they actually have grains of truth to them. And I'm not saying that metaphorically, like, oh, it seems like a zombie type world, but one day there's really going to be zombies. No, man. Zombies are all around you right now. There's no life in the eyes of the people of this world. And not only that, but it's a very numb world. The world is numb. It can't feel anything. It's electric. Electricity is everywhere. I don't remember electricity being all that necessary during the last cataclysm or right before it, but this world is all electric, and there's no life, and people are numb, and they're all just walking around, and they're just feeding the energy here, and it's different. It's similar in that it needs to be washed away and start brand new, but it's also different. But like I said, that's something I'll talk about in another video. Anyways, thank you everybody for watching. I hope this all made sense to you. If you got something out of this, touch base with me and just let me know. You know, if it helped you out to understand things a little better. I'm going to be talking about the elven race, and please keep in mind I am referring to the ancient elves, the gods, the Azir, the immortals, all of that. I want everyone who's listening to sort of shake away that conditioning that when we think of elves, we're thinking of a subject that only the nerds that play Dungeons and Dragons talk about, or that we're talking about little cartoon fanciful beings that bake cookies and trees. Elves deserve so much more respect and investigation and research than just that. That's taking the world for granted. That's living in a cartoon world that has no feeling or life in it any longer. I'm saying elves are real. They existed, and they probably still do, and I'm betting we'll see them again. Anyways, thank you so much for watching, everybody. You're all amazing, and have a great night. I love the end of this because it's like so awkward. I can't see myself, and I don't know if the video's off. Awkward. Okay, clearly I'm still recording, so bye-bye, everybody. Look forward to your comments.
Be sure to check out other fascinating subjects brought to you by JayDreamerZ.